I didn't realize the footsteps behind me weren't mine until I stopped walking, and the sound didn't. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. The kind of harmless winter sound you hear when the cold plays tricks on your senses. Snow settling, tree branches cracking, wind brushing over frozen ground. All the excuses that make you feel safe when something is already very, very wrong. But the footsteps continued, slow, crunching, and deliberate, closing the distance between me and whatever was behind me. I remember standing there in the middle of the trail, my breath fogging out in front of me like smoke from a dying fire. My heartbeat loud enough to drown out the world. I remember telling myself, don't turn around. Don't look. Don't make this real. And yet, I knew it was already real. The forest was dead silent, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful but hollow. Like everything living had already run away, and I was the only idiot left. My cheeks were burning from the freezing wind, but my spine felt ice cold. I took one step forward. The footsteps followed with perfect timing, as if something was copying me, mirroring me, shadowing me. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't paranoid. Something was actually there, and it wanted me to know. I kept listening, holding my breath so carefully that the air burning inside my lungs felt like fire. Every crunch behind me was slow, patient, almost curious, like the thing wasn't in a rush, like it enjoyed letting me know I wasn't alone. I thought about running, but everyone who's ever been truly afraid knows that moment. The one where your body locks up, where fear crawls into your bones and freezes you from the inside. I was stuck between two choices that both felt wrong. Move and risk provoking whatever was following me, or stay and let it get closer. Then came the second sound. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Not any animal I'd ever heard. A dragging sound. Something heavy across the snow. Slow. Scraping. The sound of weight being pulled, like someone dragging a body behind them. I felt my throat close up. My knees weakened. The cold suddenly didn't matter. Every drop of warmth left my body, replaced by a sensation that felt like a hand gripping the back of my neck. That's when I finally turned around. And there was nothing. Just miles of silent forest. No footprints. No shadows. No movement. No wind. Nothing. But when I looked back at my own footprints in the snow, there were two sets. Mine and another right beside them. Fresh. Deep. And stopping exactly where I had stopped. Something had been standing next to me. Watching me. Close enough to touch me. I didn't scream. Couldn't. My voice was gone, swallowed by the freezing air and whatever presence had been walking with me. I remember backing up slowly, terrified that turning my back again would invite whatever it was to come closer. But as soon as I took one shaky step, the footprints beside mine continued forward. On their own. No body attached. No shadow. Just footsteps moving across the untouched snow, heading deeper into the trees, as if inviting me to follow. That was the moment I knew this wasn't wind or imagination, or cold weather hallucination. Something was out there with me, and it wanted me alone. Before everything went wrong that night, my life was about as ordinary as it gets. My name is Daniel Hart, a 29-year-old school counselor from Minnesota, and winter camping had always been my escape from the noise of everyday life. Most people around me hated the snow, hated the cold, hated the long months of darkness, but not me. I grew up with it. Winter was familiar, predictable, comforting. Like an old friend who didn't talk much but always stayed close. That night, the world felt calm in a way I rarely experienced back home. I had taken a short solo trip to a remote part of Superior National Forest, something I'd done plenty of times before. It was about 7:30 p.m. when I reached my campsite, the sky already sinking into deep blue, with the last hints of pink fading along the horizon. The quiet was soft, peaceful, even comforting. The kind of silence you only get miles away from civilization, where the nearest human is probably an hour's drive away. My plan was nothing special. Hike a bit, set up camp, take some photos, and enjoy the weekend without my phone buzzing every other minute. That was the whole point of coming out there. To disconnect, breathe cold, clean air, and listen to absolutely nothing but nature. I remember the snow that evening. Thick, fluffy flakes drifted down in slow motion, covering everything in a gentle white blanket. The sound of snow landing on my jacket felt softer than a whisper. I set up my tent near a small frozen lake, where the ice glowed faintly under the moonlight like glass dipped in silver. I felt good, relaxed even. No stress. No rush. Just me, my thoughts, and the familiar crunch of snow under my boots. I boiled some water for tea, sat down on a log, and let the steam warm my face as I watched my breath mix with it. I remember thinking about work, about how exhausting the school week had been, about how desperately I needed this break. Out there, the air didn't feel heavy like it did in the city. Out there, the only weight I felt was the soft press of my jacket and the quiet safety of being completely alone. Around 8:15 p.m. I took a short walk to a viewpoint I found earlier. A small ridge overlooking a valley of fir trees. The forest below looked like a postcard, untouched and almost dreamlike. I took a few photos, checked the time, and smiled to myself. Everything was perfect. I wasn't scared. Not even a little. If anything, I felt safer there than I did in my own apartment sometimes. I walked back to camp feeling almost proud that I'd managed to pack light, organize everything efficiently, and settle in so quickly. I brushed the snow off my tent, tightened my boots, and zipped up my coat as the temperature continued to drop. The cold didn't bother me that much. Minnesota winters train you well. The stillness around me felt protective, not threatening. The forest was asleep, its branches heavy with fresh snow, its air crisp and clean. Even the distant howling of wind through the treetops sounded peaceful, like nature humming itself a sleepy winter tune. Nothing felt off. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing hinted at the nightmare waiting for me. If someone had told me that within an hour I'd be running for my life, convinced something was stalking me through the snow, I would have laughed. I would have said winter was the safest time to be outdoors. But looking back now, I realized that peace wasn't safety. It was the last calm breath before something else woke up. Something that had been waiting for me long before I stepped into those woods. The first moment something felt wrong was so small, so insignificant, that I almost didn't register it. I had just finished my tea and was tightening the drawstrings on my tent when I heard it. A faint crunch somewhere behind me. Not close. Not threatening. Just out of place. At first, I thought it was just snow sliding off a branch, or maybe a squirrel hopping through the powder. But the forest was quiet, too quiet even for winter. No wind, no rustling, no distant creaks from settling ice. Just stillness, like the whole world was holding its breath. I stood there for a few seconds listening. Nothing happened. So I shrugged it off, zipped my tent open, and crawled inside. But the uneasiness lingered. You know that feeling you get when the silence feels heavy, like there's a second presence in it? That's what it felt like inside my tent. I lay down, pulled my sleeping bag over my chest, and tried to relax. I told myself it was normal to be more aware of sounds when you're camping alone. Your mind gets sharper. Your ears become more alert. Every noise seems louder because the world around you is so quiet. But a few minutes later I heard it again. Crunch. A single step. Slow. Deliberate. Not the rapid patter of an animal. Not the soft collapse of snow. A step. I sat up immediately, heart tapping a little faster. I unzipped the tent just a bit, letting in a thin beam of moonlight. The forest outside looked untouched, just an endless stretch of white with shadows between the trees. No movement. No tracks. No sign of anything. I checked my surroundings carefully. Everything was exactly how I left it. But the air had changed. Before it felt crisp and light. Now it felt colder, like something was subtly draining the warmth from it. I rubbed my hands together, climbed back inside, and tried to push the feeling aside. I reminded myself I was tired. My mind was probably amplifying normal sounds. Snow shifts constantly in forests. Ice cracks. Branches drop. Winter has its own language, and sometimes it's easy to misinterpret it. But then the wind came back. Except it wasn't wind, not really. It sounded like wind at first, but it shifted. It rose and fell strangely, almost rhythmic. Almost like breathing. A long, slow exhale drifting through the trees. I held my breath and listened hard. For 10 whole seconds the forest sounded like it was inhaling. Then it stopped abruptly, unnaturally. The silence that followed felt wrong. Not peaceful like before, but watchful. The kind of quiet you experience when you walk into a room and know someone was talking about you before you arrived. I tried to sleep, but every time I started drifting off, some tiny sound pulled me back awake. A faint tapping, a distant shuffle, a soft echo of something moving far across the snow. None of it was close. None of it was dangerous. But all of it was wrong. Eventually, I gave up trying to rest and sat upright again. My breath puffed in the air in small shaky clouds. I checked my watch. 9:42 p.m. I'd only been there for a couple of hours, but suddenly it felt like the woods had been watching me the whole time. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach clench. My footsteps, the ones I made earlier, looked different. Not all of them, just a few near the edge of my campsite. They looked softer, as if something had stepped into them after me. Not enough to erase the shape, but enough to distort it. I stared at them for a long time. Snow doesn't settle like that. It doesn't choose random prints to soften. Something else had touched them. A cold shiver went down my back. Not from the winter air, but from the sudden certainty that I was no longer alone. I tried to calm myself. I tried to pretend it was nothing. But deep down I knew better. Something was out there. Something that didn't want to be seen. Something that moved just enough to remind me that the forest wasn't empty. And for the first time that night, I wished I hadn't come alone. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those softened footprints, but the cold eventually forced me to move. My hands were shaking, not from the temperature, but from the feeling growing in my chest, a heavy sinking dread I couldn't explain away anymore. I reached for my flashlight. The moment I clicked it on, the atmosphere changed. The beam cut across the snow, but instead of giving me comfort, it seemed to make the darkness pull back. Like something alive and cautious was retreating just beyond the edges. The shadows felt thicker, stretched too long across the untouched ground. The air grew heavier. So heavy I could actually feel the weight of it pressing on my chest, making each breath stiff and shallow. I stepped out of my tent slowly, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me whispered that staying still was worse. My boots crunched on the snow. Just that sound alone echoed too loudly, like it didn't belong in the silence that swallowed the forest. I swept my flashlight across the trees again, scanning for anything. An animal, a person, anything that made sense. But then the beam stopped, because I saw tracks. Not mine. Not distorted versions of mine. New ones. Fresh. Deep. Leading from between the trees straight toward my campsite. My stomach twisted. They weren't shaped like boots or paws. They were too long. Too narrow. Almost like feet, human feet, but stretched out unnaturally, leaving elongated impressions in the snow. Each step was spaced far apart, as if whatever made them had taken impossible strides. And they stopped exactly 5 feet away from my tent, right where I had been sitting minutes earlier. I froze. My breath hitched. My heartbeat thudded painfully in my ears. Then I noticed something else, something that turned my blood to ice. There were no tracks leading away. Whatever had walked up to me hadn't walked back. It was still here. I felt eyes on me. Not imagined. Not guessed. Felt. A presence, cold and deliberate, watching from the tree lean. My flashlight trembled in my grip as I turned slowly toward the forest. That's when I saw it. Not clearly, just a shape, a silhouette standing between 2 tall pines. Tall. Too tall. Thin. Unnaturally thin, like its limbs didn't have real bone structure. And its head, it tilted slowly, as if studying me with something that wasn't curiosity, but something darker, something hungry. I couldn't move. Every muscle locked. The only thing alive was the cold rippling through my spine. Then it stepped forward. One smooth, gliding motion. No crunch of snow. No sound at all. My flashlight flickered. The shape froze. The trees seemed to lean closer, like even the forest wanted to get away from whatever that thing was. The wind didn't blow, but I could hear something. A low hum, deep and vibrating through the air, like a growl swallowed in the throat. My instincts finally snapped awake. I stumbled backward toward my tent, eyes locked on the figure. My boot caught on my own gear and I nearly fell, but I didn't dare look down. My whole body screamed at me to run, hide, do anything except stand here exposed. The silhouette took another step. Closer. Clearer. More horrifying. The face, if it even had one, reflected the faintest bit of moonlight. Not eyes. Not features. Just a smooth, pale surface like stretched skin, pulled tight over something that didn't understand human shape, but was trying to imitate it. The heaviness in the air intensified, crushing the breath out of my lungs. My vision tunneled. Panic clawed up my throat. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't some animal. This wasn't some person lost in the woods. This wasn't anything that belonged here. and it had found me. The moment its featureless face turned fully toward me, every instinct in my body detonated at once. Run. Now. I didn't think, I just moved. I lunged backward, tearing through my campsite so fast I knocked over my lantern, sending it rolling across the snow. The thin beam of my flashlight swung wildly, slicing through the darkness as I sprinted toward the tree line opposite the creature. Behind me I heard it move. Not footsteps. Not running. A swift scraping glide like something sliding just above the snow, closing distance far too quickly. My lungs burned as I pushed myself faster. Branches whipped at my jacket. The cold bit into my face. My heartbeat hammered so violently it drowned out everything else. I didn't dare look back. I dodged between trees, slipping on patches of ice, nearly falling, catching myself at the last second. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound felt like it was gaining on me. My breath came out in broken bursts, fogging the bitter air. For a moment I thought the forest was helping me. Thick trunks, fallen logs, frozen bushes forming a natural maze between me and that thing. But then the sound stopped. All of it. The wind, the distant cracks of branches, even the crunch of snow beneath my own boots seemed muted. Too quiet. Too wrong. I skidded to a stop, chest heaving, listening, really listening. Nothing. Just that crushing, suffocating stillness. I turned slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. There was nothing behind me. No figure. No tracks. Just untouched snow. My stomach dropped. It wasn't relief, it was terror so deep my legs almost gave out. Because it hadn't disappeared. It had repositioned. A crack sounded above me. I jerked my head up just in time to see something pale and long dropping from the branches overhead, its limbs unfolding backward like a spider climbing down its own web. I dove out of the way as it hit the snow with impossible grace, barely making a sound. I rolled, scrambling to my feet, slipping, catching myself by digging my hands into the freezing powder. My fingers stung. My knees throbbed. My clothes soaked through instantly. I didn't stop. I ran again, faster, harder. Feeling tears sting my eyes from the cold and the panic, I spotted a fallen tree ahead and dove behind it, flattening myself against the frozen bark. My breath came in sharp, choking gasps. I clamped a hand over my mouth, trying to quiet the sound. The forest stayed silent. But then the tree above me began to creak. Slowly, deliberately, like something was crawling across it. Snow dusted down onto my back in soft flakes. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I waited. A long, thin arm slid into view over the edge of the fallen trunk, jointed wrong, bending in angles no body should bend. Its fingers were too many, too long, curling over the wood like pale roots searching for something alive beneath the soil. Me. My heart seized. This was it. I was done. But then, a sound exploded through the trees. A distant howl. Not an animal howl. Not a human scream. Something deep and echoing, coming from far beyond the forest, vibrating through the air like the ground itself was warning that creature. The arm froze. It pulled back slowly, reluctantly, disappearing into the shadows. The creaking above me stopped. The forest fell into that same impossible silence, but the pressure in the air loosened just enough for me to breathe again. I didn't know why it left. I didn't know what it heard. But I didn't waste the chance. I shot up from behind the log and sprinted toward the faint glow of my campsite through the trees. My legs trembled. My vision blurred. The cold clawed at my skin. But I didn't stop until I reached the tent, grabbed my keys, and bolted toward my truck parked on the snow-covered trail. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, locked it, and jammed the key into the ignition with shaking hands. The engine roared to life. But before I could hit the gas, something moved in the treeline. Slow. Tall. Watching. Waiting. I hit the accelerator so hard the truck fishtailed on the ice, tearing down the trail as fast as it could go, the creature shrinking in my rearview mirror, but never breaking eye contact. Not once. I didn't stop driving until the forest was miles behind me, until the trees thinned out and the road straightened enough for my hands to stop shaking. Even then I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting that tall, pale thing to come gliding up the road after me. It didn't. Not that night. I reached the nearest small town just before dawn. The sky was a dim, washed-out gray, and the world looked empty, like the cold had chased everyone indoors. I parked outside a rundown gas station, turned off the engine, and just sat there. shivering, breathing, trying to make sense of what had happened. My mind replayed everything: the footsteps in the snow, the distorted figure dropping from the trees, the way it moved without sound, the way it watched me like it was choosing a moment rather than chasing prey. I kept telling myself I was safe now, but every time a car passed, or a door slammed somewhere nearby, my entire body jolted like it was still in those woods. Inside the gas station, the fluorescent lights were harsh and almost painfully bright. The clerk glanced at me and raised an eyebrow. "Rough night?" he asked. I almost laughed. If only he knew. I bought coffee, a map, and some hand warmers. My hands still trembled so badly the items nearly slipped from my grip. As I turned to leave, he called after me. "Storm rolled in last night. Surprised anyone was up in those woods." I froze. Storm? There was no storm. Not where I was. Before I could respond, the clerk shook his head. "We had heavy winds. Trees down everywhere on the north side. Ranger station said no one should have been out there." I walked out without answering. My campsite wasn't on the north side. But the woods had been dead silent. No wind. No storm. Nothing natural. Back in my truck, I opened the map, tracing where I'd been. A cold realization sank into me. The spot where I had camped had no marked trail. Not even the faint dotted lines showing older or unofficial paths. There shouldn't have been a clearing there at all. I tried to convince myself I'd misread the map. Maybe I'd set up camp somewhere else. Maybe the cold had messed with my sense of direction. But the more I looked, the more certain I became. The place I'd spent the night wasn't on any map. Like it didn't exist. Or like it wasn't supposed to. Still shaking, I called the ranger station. I needed to tell someone. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe help, maybe reassurance, maybe just someone to confirm other people had seen something strange in those woods. But when the ranger answered and I described the area, his response made my skin crawl. "There's nothing out there," he said firmly. "Not for miles. No trails. No campsites. No clearings." A pause. "No one goes that deep in winter. It's not safe." "I was there," I insisted. "There was a clearing. Fire pit. Snow packed down like people had camped there before." His voice dropped lower. "Sir, that part of the forest burned down 12 years ago. There are no standing trees. No clearings. Nothing to camp under." I went silent. Because I had been surrounded by trees. Tall ones. Alive ones. And something living in them. I didn't argue further. I just hung up. For the next few days I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the soft creak of branches above me, the scraping glide of something moving too fast without touching the snow. I tried going back to work, back to routine, back to normal. But normal didn't feel real anymore. The world felt thinner somehow, like the boundary between where I lived and where that thing lived wasn't as solid as I'd believed. 2 nights ago it got worse. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. No dream. No noise. Just a feeling. A heavy stillness in the room. The same stillness I remembered from the woods. The kind that smothers sound, smothers warmth, smothers everything except fear. I sat up slowly. My window was open. Snow had drifted onto the floor beneath it, forming a perfect oval shape. No footprints leading toward it, no marks on the sill. Just that one silent shape of disturbed snow. Like something had stood there, watching me sleep. And when I followed the faint trail of melted droplets across the floor to my bedroom door, something was written there in the frost on the wood. One long sweeping line. A mark. The same shape the creature had dragged across the snow when it reached for me. I wiped it away instantly, my hands shaking. But the wood still felt cold. Too cold. Colder than winter. And now, every time I walk past a tree, every time I hear a branch creak, every time I see fresh snow settle outside my window, I can't help wondering, what if it didn't follow me? What if I never escaped the woods at all?